Quick, hide the sweets. The drawer had barely shut before Nurse Thompson appeared beside the bed. Karen and I looked at one another, trying our hardest to look innocent. We were two 7-year-olds about to become hospital criminals. To understand why two little girls were trying to smuggle sweets in a children's ward, I need to take you back to the 1950s. When a 7-year-old child is admitted to hospital nowadays, there's often provision for parents to stay. Sometimes a bed is provided. Siblings can visit, teachers, play organisers, art therapists, sometimes local celebrity footballers visit the ward. Some schools send work in if the child is going to be a long stayer, so they don't get behind with their schooling. In 1955, I was a long stayer in a children's ward. The wards weren't like they are now. This was one big room with beds all down each side, and in the middle of the room, a large, very low dining table, and on the table there would be jigsaws, pots of pens, colouring pencils. What was I going in there for? Why was I going to be a long stayer? Well, as ridiculous as it may sound now, I had, and still have, psoriasis. I wasn't unwell. I was a normal, energetic, mischievous 7-year-old who was confined to bed for much of the day so the medical organisation could function. I developed this at age 2, and my dad took me to every doctor he could, refusing to believe that there was no cure for this skin condition. I don't know what people knew about it in the 1950s, but the doctors at St Margaret's Hospital in Epping believed that if they burnt my top layers of skin off, the lower levels would be free of it. So that's what they were doing. Each day I had ultraviolet light treatment to burn off the top layer, then the next layer, and so on. So not only was I covered in psoriasis, but the rest of my skin was continually peeling. This meant that when I got up, parts of me were still where I'd been sitting. Ultraviolet light treatment meant lying still while the whole body was subject to this light. It was like a chicken being basted. One side, top, then bottom, then turn over and repeat. In between times, there were just hours of trying to entertain yourself. No online teaching back then. No teaching of any kind. I learnt the geography of the UK through doing the same jigsaw puzzle over and over. I loved the kaleidoscope. I could immerse myself in the shapes and colours, and I became adept at making animals from pipe cleaners. I spent hours drawing and colouring in, and became accomplished at cleaning my teeth with pink powder from a little round tin while sitting up in bed. I made friends, which was a necessity, as visiting times were only Sunday afternoons, and then only parents. No siblings were allowed. How we looked forward to those Sunday afternoons. If any of my siblings did accompany my parents, they'd have to come to the ward window, and I got to wave to them. Coming from a large family, that was difficult, as of course I always wanted to go home with them. I was allowed home one weekend. I'm not clear why. I think they were refurbishing the ward or painting it or something like that. Anyway, I was allowed home. Now, in those days, most people didn't have a camera at home, and photographers would go around knocking on doors to ask if anyone wanted pictures taken. One happened to come knocking that weekend, and I stood in the front garden with my 3 sisters for this picture. We're all in our sundresses. Mine is white and I look like a negative, as my skin is dark in comparison to theirs, due of course to the sun lamp treatment. However, I really looked forward to these Sunday afternoons for another reason. Sweets. Visitors were allowed to bring sweets. But we children were not allowed to eat them. As soon as the visitors left the ward, the nurses would do a sweep and scoop up all the sweets and take them away. You see, not all children had visitors, and it was thought to be unfair for some to have them and others not. So all our sweets were distributed, a few to each child each morning, after we'd swallowed our teaspoon of cod liver oil and a teaspoon of orange juice. A few meagre sweets, just 3 or 4, would be placed on the bed. Now, as an adult, I can see the rationale. Be fair to everyone. But can you imagine, through the eyes of a 7-year-old? It was anything but fair. It was very unfair. My parents had bought those sweets for me, not for everyone else. So one day, my friend Karen and I decided before visiting time that we would hide our sweets. We couldn't do it while parents were there, because the thieving nurses always came round very quickly after they'd gone. We decided the best place to hide them was at the back of the drawer in our bedside locker. It was a mad scramble to get the drawers out, shove the sweets in at the rear and shut the drawer. Then Nurse Thief arrived and went to pick up our sweets, only to find we hadn't got any. Of course, we both swore blind none had been handed over to us. But that didn't wash. A full search was instigated. Pillows were shaken, mattresses lifted, under the bed was examined, locker drawer was pulled out, nothing. I recall being really scared that they would find them, as I wasn't sure what punishment would follow, but I was sure there would be one. And maybe it would be butter beans for dinner. Ugh. Then, just as it seemed he'd got away with it, one tube of sweets rolled around and the sound was detected. Ha! Found! Both lockers were dismantled and the beautiful juicy sweets were swept up and removed. How we cried. I learnt never to trust a nurse. Now I need to add a little aside here, as remember I was only 7. So this didn't last long, which is a good job, as one of my daughters is a nurse. That wasn't the only unfair thing, and fairness is very important to a young child. The 4 beds nearest the entrance to the ward were kept for those children who were having their tonsils out. And they had something special, something the rest of us never had. Jelly and, wait for it, ice cream. Oh my word, I so wanted my tonsils out, and so did Karen, my co-conspirator. I don't know how long in total I was in there. I only know that it was agreed I could go home if I went back every Monday, Wednesday and Friday afternoon for lamp treatment. So at 8 years old, I left school at dinner time, 3 days a week, and got a bus to the hospital. And I did that until my dad saved enough money to purchase a lamp just like the hospital one, so treatment could be carried out at home. I returned to school having had no education. All during that period, I'd missed the basics of reading and maths. There was no remedial teaching in those days, you just got on with it. I felt very disconnected from the rest of my class and so wanted to fit in. I felt that so badly that when Mother Superior came into the classroom and asked for a volunteer to do a job, I sat upright, dying to be picked. And yes, hooray, I was picked. Someone had been sick all down the stairs and I'd volunteered to clean it up. Happy days. Lots of the videos that I see that hark back to the 1940s, 50s and 60s tend to see the past through rose-coloured glasses. Things were always better back then, seems to be the overriding theme. The good old days. And maybe they were for some, but they definitely weren't if you were a child in hospital. Maybe you experienced that. Were you in hospital around that era? Was your experience similar to mine? Maybe your family member was in there and you were waving through the window at them. I'd be interested to hear your comments, your memories in the comments. I do have lots of good memories from those decades, and I will be bringing them out in my next video. Once again, if you've stayed with me to the end, thank you for listening. You may have noticed a recurring theme through some of them. Yes, my love of sweets. I blame my sweet tooth on my dad, but that's another episode. I hope you're getting used to wearing those rambling boots now. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. So until the next time, happy rambling.